Hello, and welcome to our first ever virtual AAAS Fellows Forum. I'm Sudip Parikh, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of AAAS.
And I'm Claire Fraser, the president of AAAS. Although we're not together in person and not in our intended destination of Phoenix, it's great to be with you wherever you are.
We're here to recognize 489 new AAAS Fellows, our largest class in nearly a decade. The election of these amazingly accomplished individuals was surely a bright spot in an otherwise challenging year. And normally, we would all be gathered in a large ballroom, socializing with one another across the breakfast table. Now, we're not going to be able to replace the plate of lukewarm banquet eggs that you normally have, but we're still delighted to have the opportunity to acknowledge our new class of fellows.
These individuals join a group who, since 1874, have been recognized for their distinguished contributions to their fields and to the broader service of society. Nominated by our 24 disciplinary sections, these preeminent individuals represent the best of the best across all areas of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, medicine, communication, and policy from all sectors. The group we're recognizing today looks much different than the first class of AAAS Fellows elected in 1874. For starters, this is not a group comprised entirely of white men. In order to realize its full potential and truly serve all of society, the scientific enterprise must increase the participation, advancement, and recognition of underrepresented groups in its ranks. We applaud our volunteer section leadership for their efforts to cultivate nominees who represent the diversity of our ecosystem across many different coordinates: gender, race, disability, institution, sector, and more. Even so, there's much more work to be done. For example, this year's fellow class is still only about 34% female. It's an improvement, but it's not enough. I implore my colleagues across the leadership of the sections and those previously elected AAAS Fellows who submit nominations to work tirelessly to bring forward nominees that represent the best of our enterprise, including those in typically underrepresented groups. And I applaud Sudip for being truly fearless in positioning AAAS at the forefront of making sure that AAAS and its programs and the STEM enterprise more broadly is diverse, equitable, and inclusive.
Thank you for that powerful call to action, Claire. I couldn't agree more. Traditionally, our new fellows are presented with a certificate and, in the heraldic tradition, a blue and gold rosette lapel pin, blue representing science and gold representing engineering. Those items will be sent to you soon. In the meantime, we'll acknowledge our 2020 fellows by scrolling their names and institutions during this program, starting right about now. They'll be presented alphabetically by section. I hope you won't be too disappointed that you will not have to listen to me clumsily mispronounce 489 names.
And while those names begin scrolling, I'm so excited to introduce our guest speaker for today, Dr. Holden Thorpe. He's given many a rallying commencement address, so he should feel right at home at these festivities. Many of you may already know Holden, who is the 21st editor-in-chief of the Science family of journals. Holden joined AAAS in Science in October 2019, after nearly 2 decades in leadership positions at some of the nation's finest universities. A chemist by training, Holden served for 3 decades on the faculty of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he rose through the ranks and ultimately served as the university's 10th chancellor from 2008 to 2013. For 7 years, prior to joining Science, Holden served as provost of Washington University in St. Louis, where he maintains a faculty appointment as the Rita Levi Montalcini Distinguished Professor in Chemistry and Medicine. Holden is a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill, completed his graduate studies at Caltech, and was a postdoctoral fellow at Yale. An avid musician, Holden plays bass guitar and piano, including as part of the pit ensembles for student theater and musical performances at his former institutions. And I understand that prior to COVID, he was enjoying being part of the musical theater scene up the street at George Washington University. It clearly didn't take him long to get acclimated to the DC community. Under Holden's leadership, Science and the family of journals are publishing cutting-edge, breakthrough research at an unprecedented rate. And Science's news team covers the overabundance of important science news stories like no one else can. His powerful editorials are inspiring robust global conversations on the most important issues of the day. So I know what he says here will be no exception. Perhaps most relevant to today's proceedings, though, Holden is one of you. He was elected a fellow of AAAS as part of the class of 2020 by the section on chemistry. Congratulations, Holden. And now please join me in welcoming Holden Thorpe.
Thank you, AAAS and my fellow inductees. It is an honor to be a AAAS fellow, especially now that I'm part of the crew that normally works at 1200 New York Avenue to promote and celebrate science. I'm deeply grateful for the leadership of the AAAS Board of Directors, our past president, Steve Chu, our president, Claire Fraser, and our CEO, Sudip Parikh, who are deftly shepherding our treasured organization during this challenging time. And I'm deeply grateful to have the opportunity to serve as the editor-in-chief of the Science family of journals. Bringing you news, commentary, and the best scientific research in the world every week is a joy that just gets better every day. I have to pinch myself frequently to be reminded that it's real. The outstanding team led by another AAAS fellow, executive editor Monica Bradford, has been built over the last few decades by Monica and my predecessors, and as the saying goes, is simply the best. The editors are outstanding scholars and scientists who discuss, debate, and curate at the highest possible level. The operations and visuals teams that make it look great and get it out on time are dedicated and talented. The editorial support team who facilitate efficient processing and editing of content are master jugglers who never miss a deadline. And the news team led by Tim Appenzeller is the best in all of science journalism. In partnership with our business colleagues in publishing, we are proud to support the outstanding work of Sudip Parikh and all of those at the AAAS who do such great things, promoting, translating, and celebrating science, including recognizing the groundbreaking accomplishments of all of you as AAAS fellows. My wise colleague Val DeVinson describes what we do as editors as working backstage. The authors are the ones on the stage, and we're the folks that make sure the costumes, lights, and scenery are where they are supposed to be. In the last year, we have been the stage managers for the most extraordinary science play ever, as the world of science has confronted and tackled COVID-19. We are proud to support the scientists who have made such great sacrifices to save humanity. And we are proud to support the scientists who kept all of the other fields going, because we can't have a lapse of basic knowledge from this plague year. In becoming AAAS fellows, we join a tradition that stretches back to 1874. The AAAS Constitution said then that fellows shall be nominated from such of the members as are professionally engaged in science or have by their labors aided in advancing science. The AAAS Fellowship recognizes scientists, engineers, and innovators for their achievements across disciplines, from research, teaching, and technology, to administration and academia, industry, and government, to excellence in communicating, interpreting science to the public. AAAS Fellows include giants like W.E.B. Du Bois, Barbara McClintock, and Shirley Malcolm. It is certainly an honor to join them. Congratulations to you all. I would love to give an inspirational and optimistic talk today about forthcoming advances in astrophysics and organic synthesis. But the year we have lived through has not afforded me that opportunity. Instead, I need to talk to you about 3 crises we are facing, and then maybe at the end, I can come up with some optimistic things to say. The first crisis we are facing is a crisis of facts. As scientists, it is disturbing and unsettling to live in a world where basic information is so easily and casually disputed. To have the phrase alternative facts now firmly installed in our lexicon cuts to the heart of what we do. The ability of malicious actors to undermine objective observations is the crisis that enables all of the others. The pandemic has made all of this real. The undermining of the importance of masks, the calls to prematurely end social distancing, the promotion of herd immunity through natural infection as the best path to ending the pandemic, and the outright denial that COVID even exists. On March 9th, the then President of the United States tweeted that COVID was no worse than the seasonal flu. At the same time, he told Bob Woodward privately that he knew COVID was deadly stuff, but that he wanted to play it down because he didn't want to create a panic. Trump lied, plain and simple. And he insulted the intelligence of the American people, undermined scientific credibility, and cost countless lives among the COVID deniers and the people they infected. Trump said he played it down because he wanted to exude confidence. But confidence doesn't come from lies. Confidence, said Franklin Roosevelt, thrives on honesty, on honor, on the sacredness of obligations, on faithful protection, and on unselfish performance. We have seen none of these traits in 2020 from our former president and his associates. This vicious and demoralizing crisis of facts has had more destabilizing effects following the November election. The ability of President Trump and his allies to convince a large section of the country that we didn't have a free and fair election unleashed America's mortal sin of racism and led to a white supremacist attack on the US Capitol. Lives were lost and America was shamed around the world. Still, the former president even now will not acknowledge that he lost a fair election, and therefore tens of thousands of National Guard troops had to be called to Washington to protect the inauguration. We have devoted our lives to careful observation and the honorably self-correcting process of science. But these events showed that we have lost the ability to transmit our findings to the public and to earn their trust. And this has led to our second crisis, which is the crisis of preparation. The disinvestment in public health infrastructure in the United States and around the world is showing how weak we are when it comes to implementing what we know. The possibility of a pandemic like COVID-19 was no secret to scientists. Yet, we couldn't get the test ready or right in time. We couldn't protect the vulnerable in nursing homes, prisons, and the meatpacking industry. And we couldn't get PPE distributed widely or quickly. And we couldn't do it because we couldn't fight through the fog of lies that had led so many people to lack trust in science. Meanwhile, the laboratory scientists were very well prepared. The mRNA technology that produced the first vaccines was well on its way to being ready to use just at the time that COVID came along. Barney Graham, Jason McClellan, and Kizzmekia Corbett were ready to formulate their vaccine, and so were the BioNTech researchers. These folks and researchers around the globe rearranged their lives to move science forward while chaos was all around them. But as prepared as science was within itself, that preparation was not propagated to the public. Nor was it propagated to the Capitol Police on January the 6th. As white supremacists stormed the US Capitol, the country was unprepared to stop the riot. In the coming weeks, we'll learn whether the lack of preparation was intentional, but in any event, it stemmed from denial of the quantitative facts of the election and the realities of white supremacy in America. Which leads to the final crisis, and that is a crisis of equity. As we watch the Confederate flag paraded through the US Capitol and George Floyd murdered on video, politicians from both major parties declared that it didn't represent America, that it wasn't who we are. They were wrong. In the aftermath of the attack on the Capitol, Ibram Kendi said, "The heartbeat of America is denial." He goes on to say that what will make America true is the willingness of the American people to stare at their national face for the first time, to open the book of their history for the first time, and see themselves for themselves. In other words, America needs to make an objective, scientific observation of who we are, and we need to write it in our lab notebook in ink. Science is integral to American history and integral to Kendi's aspirational process of seeing ourselves for ourselves. Science can demonstrate the injustice of algorithms that allocate healthcare. Science can show how unevenly economic opportunity is distributed. Science can show how artificial intelligence creates technology that favors white faces and voices. And science can show over and over again how white police officers treat Blacks unfairly and often fatally, while white offenders are given wide berths. We saw it in vivid detail as white insurrectionists were allowed into the US Capitol, demonstrating yet again our failure to propagate what we know into the public consciousness. The crisis of facts produced a crisis of preparation, which led to yet another devastating crisis of equity. These three crises add up to a crisis of the single ideal to which we have devoted our lives as scientists, a crisis of truth. I'm afraid this paints a pretty grim picture for a ceremony that is supposed to be a celebration of what we have accomplished. But as we accept our rosettes and update our CVs with our new recognition, we also must rise to the challenge. The rosettes establish us as fellows of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And as Americans, we must apply what we know about objectivity and reasoning to improving the American condition. And how will we do that? The first step is not to lose our voice. I was proud to join the editors of Nature, the New England Journal of Medicine, and Scientific American in speaking out about the anti-science agenda of the Trump administration. Now that President Biden has installed great leaders like Eric Lander, Alondra Nelson, Francis Arnold, Maria Zuber, and Rochelle Walensky in positions of powerful influence, it is tempting to breathe a sigh of relief and retreat back to our data. We can breathe for a moment, but the forces that produce the anti-science agenda of the Trump administration are still there. And we still must speak out when the new administration lets its guard down. It will be easier with friends that we trust in the cabinet and administration, but no less urgent. The second thing is to think deeply about how we have failed as scientific communicators. Social media and preprints have accelerated science and the development of scientific consensus. Gone are the days of private summits that produce a public report months later. Yet our public deliberations are easily misused by malicious forces that want to sow confusion. How will we adapt our communications to combat this? I submit that we need new, more intentional partnerships with public communicators who can bring the public along while we reach our conclusions and publicly demonstrate how our process works. While it sounds good to say that every scientist should become a communicator, not all of us are great at it. We have a lot of other things to do, and we have to foster a vigorous debate amongst ourselves. We need a new model and new skills. Third, we have to get our act together in terms of equity within science. There is cognitive dissonance when we use science to describe inequity in society and don't apply it to our own world. We can't improve representation until we correct the norms and practices that have excluded folks from science who deserve a place with us. We must accept Kendi's challenge to see ourselves for ourselves. And finally, let's do the best doggone science we can. Let's debate science vigorously and collaboratively. Let's look in places no one has ever looked before. Let's examine our assumptions relentlessly. And when we make a mistake, let's honorably correct it and help the world understand that self-correction is part of the scientific process and not a handle for sowing confusion. It is the honor of my life to stand before you as the editor-in-chief of the Science family of journals. It is an honor to be asked to speak to you today. And it is especially an honor to join with you all as a fellow of not just any association for the advancement of science, but the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Congratulations to you all.
Thanks very much to Holden for those fabulous remarks. We always like to mention our longest standing fellows at the end of our forum, and we do not know if he is watching now, but we'd like to recognize John Schachter, elected in 1954, and thank him for his continued involvement with the organization, for which we are very grateful. We hope that our 2020 fellows will be involved with us as long as Dr. Schachter has.
Claire, let me join you in giving our warmest congratulations to those of you who are joining the rank of AAAS Fellow. We hope you will display this honor proudly as a symbol of our common mission, advancing science and serving society. On behalf of Claire Fraser and the entire AAAS team, thank you for attending this year's forum. Farewell from Washington.